What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I am your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. With that being said, let's jump into a Thursday edition of Pistons Daily. So first things first, as always, our skill of the day. And I just wanted to talk about Caris LeVert's aggression attacking downhill. And I know this is a very niche skill, so I wanted to touch on just his foul drawing ability, how much he shoots the ball at the rim, and just the fact that that is a huge part of his skill set. So we know Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey have had their struggles in the past of finishing at the rim, and they do both get a very just eye-opening lack of calls from the officials, especially Cade Cunningham. I know early on in his career, he had one of the lowest free throw rates in the entire NBA. It got a little bit better last year, but still there was times where he was not able to get foul calls. He was getting hacked driving down to the lane. And just because there wasn't really another secondary ball handler around Cade Cunningham, the lane really condensed when he would drive down. And I think that attributed a lot to his inability to finish at times. But having a guy like Caris LeVert is going to be very beneficial because he was able to finish 32% of and one opportunities last year, which was in the 84th percentile amongst wings. And when Caris LeVert was fouled on 11.4% of his shot attempts, which was in the 82nd percentile. And again, just having someone outside of Cade that can apply pressure in the paint is really going to open things up for both Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, not only this year, but heading into the future. I do think that having a guy come off of the bench like Caris LeVert is just very beneficial for a young team because it shows these guys that there is an ability for these 6'5", 6'6" wings to get downhill, still be able to finish at the cup while maintaining touch, maintaining their just overall control at the rim as well. And I think Cade Cunningham can really learn from that, being able to finish through contact. So excited to just see what Caris LeVert can bring to the table. Obviously, there is some question marks surrounding his overall efficiency, but it is good to see that he finishes through contact, he draws fouls, he gets to the free throw line. Obviously, we want him to shoot a little bit better than what he has traditionally in the past from the free throw line, but just being able to get there and again, open up the lane is going to be very beneficial for this team going forward. So excited to see what he can do this year. But moving on, ESPN did continue their top 100 list. They released 51 through 11. They did not release their top 10, but Cade Cunningham does come in at number 12 on this list. And I'll just read what the ESPN insiders had to say about Cade. So last year he was ranked 67th, which was just ridiculous. But this year, obviously now, he proved a ton this past season, and he is number 12. So they write, in his first taste of postseason basketball, Cunningham absolutely looked up to the task. The young Piston took a major step forward with a tough first-round playoff series that ultimately ended in a loss to the Knicks. Cunningham was at the forefront of Detroit's turnaround last season, which led to his rise up this list. With more talent surrounding him on the roster, Cunningham looked like the star Detroit envisioned when it selected him number 1 overall in 2021, as he earned a spot in the All-Star game for the first time while averaging 26, 9, and 6. The playoffs are a learning curve for any young star, and Cunningham was no exception, but he'll be worth watching this season to see how he continues to evolve after his first experience playing meaningful NBA games. Signature stat, Cunningham averaged career highs across the board last season while becoming the first Pistons player to average 25 points and 9 assists in a season. So they have Cade Cunningham at 12. I'm not going to get in too much, I think he should be higher. I simply think he should be higher. They have Jalen Williams at 11 from the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have Evan Mobley at 13, Anthony Davis at 14, Donovan Mitchell at 15. So some of these players that I do think Cade is better than, like Donovan Mitchell, and obviously Evan Mobley and Anthony Davis play completely different positions. But when you're looking at some of the guards behind him, Devin Booker, they've got guys like Jaylen Brown and Bam Adebayo, Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, James Harden, and that's very fair. I think that Cade Cunningham is better than all of those guys, and we'll have to see what that top 10 really looks like. But having Jalen Williams above him is, I think, a little bit disrespectful. Obviously, in Jalen Williams' own right, he's an unbelievable player, and he just had a big role in the Thunder championship, but that's not really the criteria of the list. The list is who are the best players in the NBA, and Cade Cunningham is currently a better player than Jalen Williams. And obviously, numbers don't always tell the full story, but Cade was much better than Jalen Williams as a scorer. He averaged 4 points more per game. He averaged about 4 more assists per game, 2 more rebounds a game. And yes, Jalen Williams brings a different dynamic defensively, but Cade Cunningham is still a very, very good defender in his own right as well. So I just truly think that Cade overall, when you're looking at these two players, not what teams they're on, not what situations they're in, not where they're drafted, nothing else. You look at simply the players, Cade Cunningham is a better player than Jalen Williams. So I do think that Cade will inch his way into this top 10 by hopefully the midway point of next year. Again, we'll have to see who is in that top 10, but it's looking like guys like Victor Wembanyama, who I have said that Cade is better than, and Jalen Brunson, who I've said that I think Cade is better than, are both going to be ahead of him. Again, Jalen Brunson, we've talked about it a million times on here. He had an unbelievable playoff series. He's a very good player, but Cade's younger, he's a better passer, and he's really coming into his own as an NBA player much quicker than Jalen Brunson did when he was coming into the league. So I do think that Cade is going to find his way into that top 10 by the end of next year. And going into next season, we're going to be looking at him as a top 10 player in this league. And again, very subjective list. It's just the ESPN insider's opinion, so we're not going to take it, too harsh. But it is kind of interesting to just talk about Cade as a top 10 player because the fact that he's 12, he's inching closer and closer and closer. He was 67 last year. He's 12 this year. I think that he can take another jump, obviously not as big, but into that top 8, 9 conversation amongst the best players in the entire NBA. But let me know your thoughts down below if you think Cade should be higher or lower on the list and what you would think he needs to do this year to crack that top 10 going into 2026, 2027. Moving on here, another topic that I thought was pretty interesting was just 3 potential trade targets for the Pistons from Nathaniel Holloway, over at Athlon. And I do like all 3 players that he mentioned. I think these are all very realistic as well. One, Lauri Markkanen. We've talked about him a bunch on the channel, and we've talked about him in depth. He would be an unbelievably good floor spacing, offense-first power forward that could really mesh with this young core. He was an all-star, I believe, 2 seasons ago. Obviously, the Jazz are in a very weird state for their franchise, so Lauri Markkanen was shut down last year. He wasn't able to really get going. He was in and out of the lineup just with rest and with injury. So we don't really know what Lauri Markkanen looks like at the highest level he can play right now. But I do think it's very similar to the all-star level he played. He's still a very solid player overall. And I think at the right price, a Lauri trade at the deadline could be a very, very real possibility for the Pistons. The Jazz have consistently asked for far too much draft capital and young talent for Lauri Markkanen in the past. That's really why they haven't been able to move him. But if they finally kind of come to their senses and they want to move him at a discount to an Eastern Conference team, get him out of the West, then the Pistons could be a very real possibility there. We'll just have to see what Austin Ainge wants to do for the Jazz, if he does envision Lauri Markkanen meshing with their young core, or if he thinks that he doesn't really fit that timeline. The Pistons could be an option there. And then the second option he had was CJ McCollum, and we know the Pistons went out and got a very good veteran point guard at the deadline last year to fill some ball handling roles. So if Jaden Ivey isn't really fitting in that secondary ball handler role like you'd like him to, and you want him to more be focused on being off ball, and Caris LeVert isn't really handling the ball handling duties or facilitating roles as much as you would like him to do, then CJ McCollum is a very, very good option for the Pistons. He's a little bit older, obviously, but you could get him at a pretty cheap price because the Washington Wizards are also in a weird spot where they're pretty much in the first stages of their rebuild, just kind of buying into their young core. CJ McCollum could be a guy they look to move off from at the deadline, and the Pistons could be a potential candidate where he could land. I do like CJ McCollum. He's still a very good scorer. He can still handle the ball. He can still pass the ball. And I think on a Pistons team, he would be much better off than what we've seen from the past few years where he hasn't really got an opportunity to shine or be on a competitive team. I think the Pistons would allow him that opportunity, and that could be a good fit. And then the last trade target that Holloway mentioned in his article was AJ Green. And I think this could be a great floor spacing option. We've talked about it a million times on here. You lost Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. Malik Beasley was number 1 in all-time or in single-season Pistons three-pointers. Tim Hardaway Jr. was number 9 in single-season three-point makes for the Pistons. So you lose 2 top 10 franchise shooters, and AJ Green could be a guy. He comes in alongside Duncan Robinson, and you can rely on him for great movement shooting, great floor spacing. And if that is an issue that's not resolved and Duncan Robinson isn't really bringing as much as you would have liked him to, again, could be a trade deadline acquisition for the Pistons and could really help them push into the playoffs and potentially make a run coming off of the bench. So I do like AJ Green, I like CJ McCollum, and I like Lauri Markkanen. I think all 3 players would fit well on this team. Again, it'll be a matter of just what Trajan Langdon looks like or looks at the future as, and if the Pistons can be competitive right away, maybe he'll go out and make one of those moves that kind of fills some of the holes that we've seen in the current Pistons lineup, and that could be an option heading into either next season or into the second half of next year. So very, very interesting. Athlon does a great job of coming out with lists like this. And again, with the offseason being very, very slow right now, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of touch on 3 targets or 3 potential trade candidates. And all 3 are very viable. I do think that there's a possibility that one of those players is traded. Obviously, maybe it won't be those 3 players. It could be somebody else. But the Pistons did it last year with Dennis Schroeder. Again, if they see some holes, I do expect them to address them at the deadline. And it will be interesting to see what that kind of looks like. But before we wrap up the show here, I just wanted to start a new segment here on the show. And I just wanted to I want to end each show kind of giving some season expectations for the team. Obviously, training camp starts on Monday, so we're going to get a kind of a sneak peek at what the season's going to look like. But I wanted to just kind of go through one thing that I think the Pistons need to find out about this team, one thing they need to address. And this year, in our first expectation is going to be Jaden Ivey, and if he's able to come into his own this year. I do think that we are going to see Jaden Ivey get featured a ton in this offense. They want to get an answer on whether or not he can be a long-term piece next to Cade Cunningham going forward, and that's the expectation. The expectation is that we find out whether or not Jaden Ivey is going to be that long-term fit. Coming into this year, he's got a lot of expectations. He had a great 30-game sample size last year before getting injured, and he has to prove if that was a fluke or not. I don't think it was a fluke. I do think that he's really improved as a three-point shooter, maybe not at a 41% clip like we saw last year, but still, if we get a full sample size of Jaden Ivey playing next to Cade this year, I do think he can be a 37, 38, 39% shooter and score 17, 18, 19 points a game on pretty solid overall efficiency. But I think that by this time next year, you have to either have extended Ivey or you have to have moved on to pair Cade Cunningham with another backcourt mate that you are comfortable with going into the future as somebody that can be a second option on this team next to Cade if they want to push for a championship in the future. So really, really excited to see if that question gets answered. Hopefully it's sooner than later in the season. Hopefully by 20 games in, we're like, yes, Jaden Ivey is back. He is back to where he was before he got injured, and he can be the guy next to Cade long term. He's still 23 years old or 22. I think he's 23 years old. He's going into year 4, and there's a lot of question marks just surrounding what he can do and if he can kind of fit that role that the Pistons have envisioned for him and that they've been vocal about. And I do think that he will kind of answer that question. But again, only time will tell. And at the end of the day, this is a business. The NBA is a business. And obviously, I feel very confident with Jaden Ivey. He was a homegrown draft pick. He loves Detroit. He's a Big Ten guy. He plays the game the right way. He's very energetic, and he's a fun player to watch overall. But if he doesn't perform this year or doesn't really show improvements, then the front office is going to have to make some decisions. So, again, it's going to be very interesting to just see how that develops throughout the year. But I am, again, confident that he has the ability to play at a very high level and come back better than even he was last year. So, but let me know in the comments if you think Jaden Ivey can be that secondary ball handler / scoring option next to Cade for the future, or if you'd like to see the Pistons go in a different direction, or if you're like me, you're kind of waiting for that proof of concept to see what he looks like next to Cade this year, what he looks like next to Asar and Jalen Duren and some of these other young pieces that the Pistons have kind of solidified as their core going forward. But that's all I've got for you guys today on a Thursday edition of Pistons Daily. As always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison 2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 67 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.